The sun hung low over the canopy, bleeding orange light across the forest floor. Long, jagged shadows stretched from the trees, swallowing the patches of dry grass one by one. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of cooling earth and decaying leaves. Beneath the sprawling canopy of a banyan tree, the forest fell into a deep, unnatural quiet. Rajan lay sprawled across the roots. His massive chest rose and fell in slow, rhythmic pulses that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. He shifted his weight, his heavy claws digging into the soft soil, carving deep furrows into the dirt. He did not move again. His eyes remained closed, his breathing steady and deep, anchoring the entire clearing in his stillness. The light continued to drain from the sky, turning the vibrant green of the forest into a muted, charcoal gray. A few yards away from the banyan tree, the dry grass parted. Miku emerged, his movements sharp and erratic. He darted forward 2 inches, froze, and twitched his nose against the cooling air. His whiskers vibrated, scanning for the faint, earthy scent of a fallen seed. He moved with a frantic, jerky rhythm, his paws barely touching the ground before he lunged toward another patch of debris. He was a blur of motion in the dark, his tiny heart hammering against his ribs. He scurried over a fallen twig, paused to inspect a hollow in the dirt, and then darted toward the base of the banyan tree. He was entirely focused on the ground, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. He did not look up. He did not sense the massive weight of the predator only a few feet away. His path led him directly toward the sprawling roots where the lion lay. He stopped, sniffed a patch of moss, and took another quick, nervous step forward. He was searching for sustenance, driven by a singular, desperate hunger. He moved closer, his tail flicking behind him, completely oblivious to the giant shadow looming in the dark. He reached the edge of the lion's reach. Miku took the final step. His tiny front paw descended, landing squarely on the center of the lion's velvet-soft pad. The contact was unmistakable. The mouse felt the warmth of the skin beneath his toes, a surface far softer than the hard, packed earth. He froze. His whiskers brushed against the coarse, thick fur of the lion's limb. He stayed perfectly still, his heart stuttering in his chest. The silence of the forest seemed to deepen, pressing in on the clearing. Then, the ground beneath the mouse shifted. The massive limb beneath him flexed. The lion's skin tightened, pulling taut against the muscle. Miku tried to retract his paw. A low, internal rumble started deep within the lion's chest, a vibration that traveled through the roots and into the mouse's own bones. Rajan's eyelids flickered. Then, they snapped open. 2 pools of molten gold ignited in the dim light. The transition from total stillness to lethal intent was instantaneous. The lion did not blink. He stared, his pupils dilating. The response was not a strike, but a sudden collapse of space. Rajan shifted his weight with a speed that defied his massive frame. In a blur of golden fur and raw muscle, the lion's heavy paw swept across the dirt. There was no time for the mouse to scramble or retreat. The lion's limb descended, slamming into the earth with a dull, heavy thud that vibrated through the forest floor. Miku was caught beneath the center of the pad. The pressure was absolute. He was pinned firmly against the packed soil, his tiny body pressed into the grit. The lion did not move again. He held his paw steady, a crushing weight that left the mouse completely immobilized. Miku's tiny chest began to heave, his ribs expanding and contracting in rapid, shallow bursts against the coarse fur of the lion's limb. His whiskers trembled, fluttering against the rough texture of the lion's skin. He squeezed his eyes shut, his muscles locking in a state of total, involuntary paralysis. Above him, the lion remained still, his heavy breathing now the only sound in the clearing. The mouse was trapped, his frantic energy extinguished. Rajan leaned forward, his massive head descending until he was inches from the pinned mouse. The lion's breath was hot and heavy, a humid gust that ruffled the fur along Miku's spine. The mouse felt the air move, carrying the scent of raw power and ancient forest musk. Rajan did not strike again. Instead, he let out a low, vibrating growl that seemed to emerge from the very roots of the banyan tree. The sound was not a roar, but a deep, rhythmic thrumming that rattled the dry leaves scattered on the ground. The lion's golden eyes narrowed, focusing on the trembling creature beneath his weight. He held the mouse firmly, his claws slightly extended, ensuring there was no possibility of escape. "You dare disturb my rest?" the lion demanded, his tone sharp and expectant. Miku's throat felt tight, as if the very air had been squeezed out of his lungs. He looked up, his vision blurred by the sheer scale of the lion's face looming above. He opened his mouth, but only a thin, reedy squeak emerged. He forced himself to draw a ragged breath, his tiny chest straining against the weight of the lion's paw. "I am sorry, mighty one," he managed, his voice barely audible over the rustle of the canopy. "I did not see you. I was only tracking a seed." He paused, his whiskers twitching in a frantic, uneven rhythm. He knew the predator could end him with a single contraction of muscle. He looked directly into the molten gold of the lion's eyes, his own body shaking with a primal, bone-deep terror. "Please, let me go," he whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush of desperation. "I am small, but I am not without use. One day, I may return the favor." The promise sounded absurd even to his own ears, a tiny life offering aid to a king. He went rigid, waiting for the blow, his heart hammering against the dirt like a trapped bird. He did not look away, though every instinct screamed at him to flee. He held his ground, his gaze fixed on the lion, waiting to see if his plea would be met with mercy or a final crushing silence. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, as the lion processed the mouse's words. Rajan did not move. He stared down at the tiny creature, his golden eyes unblinking, reflecting the dappled light filtering through the banyan leaves. Then, the corners of his mouth began to twitch. He pulled his lips back, slowly, deliberately, revealing the jagged line of his sharp white fangs. The tension in his massive frame shifted from predatory focus to a mocking, jagged amusement. He let out a short, sharp snort that sent a spray of dust into the air. The sound grew, bubbling up from deep within his chest, turning into a low, rumbling chuckle that vibrated through the ground. Suddenly, the chuckle broke. Rajan threw his head back and let out a booming, thunderous laugh. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated derision, a roar of ego that tore through the quiet of the woods. The force of his laughter shook the banyan tree, causing a shower of dry leaves to drift down around them. High above, a flock of birds, startled by the sudden explosion of noise, took flight. Rajan continued to laugh, his massive body heaving, his eyes watering with the sheer absurdity of the mouse's claim. To him, the idea of a speck of dust offering aid to a king was the most ridiculous thing. The laughter finally tapered off, leaving only the sound of the wind stirring the high branches. Rajan wiped a stray tear from his eye with the back of his paw, his breathing still heavy from the exertion. He looked down at the mouse, who remained pressed into the dirt, shivering. The lion's expression shifted, the amusement hardening into a look of profound indifference. He found no challenge here, no reason to expend further energy on such a trivial existence. He leaned forward, his nose inches from the mouse's trembling frame, and exhaled a long, hot breath that ruffled the grass. Instead, he lifted his massive paw, the pads thick and calloused, and with a casual flicking motion of his wrist, he sent the mouse tumbling through the air. Miku landed in a heap of dry leaves several yards away, scrambling to his feet and darting toward the safety of the thicket without looking back. Rajan watched him go, his golden eyes tracking the erratic movement until the mouse vanished into the undergrowth. He settled back onto his haunches, shook his mane, and let out a long, satisfied yawn. Days bled into one another, and the forest air underwent a subtle, unsettling change. It grew thick, heavy, with a sharp, metallic tang of damp earth and iron. The humidity clung to the leaves. Rajan moved through the undergrowth, his body low to the ground, every muscle coiled and ready. He had caught a scent. A deer stood in a small clearing ahead, its ears twitching, unaware of the golden eyes locked onto its flank. Rajan shifted his weight, his pads making no sound against the forest floor. He tensed his hindquarters, dug his claws into the soil, and launched himself forward. He was a blur of motion, a streak of tawny power tearing through the ferns. His breathing became a rhythmic, guttural rasp as he closed the distance. The deer bolted, but Rajan was faster. He did not see the subtle disturbance in the brush. He did not notice the thin braided line stretched tight across his path. His front paw struck the hidden vine, and the forest floor seemed to vanish beneath him. A sharp, metallic click echoed through the clearing, followed instantly by the violent hiss of tension released. A coil of thick, braided hemp erupted from the brush, whipping upward with the speed of a striking snake. The rope caught his forelegs mid-stride, jerking them upward and backward with a force that defied his massive weight. Rajan's momentum betrayed him. The sudden resistance yanked him off his feet, throwing his body sideways into the air. Before he could land, the secondary loops tightened, pulling his powerful limbs hard against his chest. He hit the ground with a heavy, jarring thud that knocked the air from his lungs. The hemp bit into his skin, cinching tighter as the weight of the mechanism locked into place. Rajan erupted. He surged upward, every fiber of his being focused on tearing the bindings apart. His massive shoulders bunched, straining against the coarse fibers. But the trap was engineered for this exact resistance. As he pulled, the knots groaned and slid, cinching tighter around his ribcage. He twisted his torso, his spine arching in a desperate attempt to gain leverage. Yet the movement only served to lock the hemp deeper into his fur. He lashed out with his hind legs, kicking at the empty air, but the secondary ropes held, pulling his limbs into an even more restricted position. The more he fought, the more the trap claimed him. He was a mountain of muscle turned against itself, his own raw power acting as the engine for his confinement. He slammed his head back, his teeth snapping at the air, but the ropes remained immovable. Every lunge, every frantic twist, only tightened the coil. The harder he pushed, the more the hemp bit into his skin, turning his predatory dominance into a suffocating cage. The final surge of energy left Rajan. His muscles, once coiled with lethal potential, went limp against the rough bark of the tree. He slumped, his massive frame sagging as the adrenaline faded into a dull, throbbing ache. The forest had gone silent. He drew a long, ragged breath, his lungs struggling to expand against the biting hemp. The air in his throat felt thick. He looked up at the canopy, his golden eyes wide and unblinking. He did not pull again. He did not twist. He simply waited, his chest heaving in slow, uneven intervals. Then, he opened his jaws. A sound erupted from his throat, starting as a low, guttural vibration that shook his entire ribcage before rising into a roar. It was a raw, jagged cry of total surrender. The sound tore through the stillness of the woods, bouncing off the trunks. He let his head fall back against the wood, his eyes closing, the last of his predatory fire extinguished. The echoes of the roar died away, leaving only the sound of Rajan's shallow, labored breathing. The forest floor was still. A single leaf drifted down, landing on the lion's motionless paw. Then, a faint rustle emerged from the dense ferns to his left. It was rhythmic, steady, and entirely out of place in the heavy silence. Rajan did not move, his eyes remaining fixed on the canopy above. From the shadows of the undergrowth, a small gray shape darted out. It paused, nose twitching against the humid air, before moving toward the base of the tree. It was Miku. He stopped inches from the lion's massive furred leg, his whiskers vibrating as he surveyed the scene. The mouse did not retreat. He stepped forward, his tiny claws gripping the coarse texture of the lion's flank. With a series of quick, calculated movements, he began to climb. He navigated the landscape of muscle and fur, finding purchase in the deep folds of the lion's skin. Rajan felt the weightless pressure of the mouse on his side. Miku pushed upward, ascending toward the thickest knot near the lion's shoulder. He reached the junction of the hemp, his eyes locked on the fibers. Miku pressed his face against the coarse, braided hemp. It smelled of rot and damp earth, a thick barrier that defied his small size. He opened his mouth, testing the tension of the fibers with his front teeth. The rope did not yield. He shifted his grip, finding a frayed edge where the strands overlapped, and clamped down with every ounce of strength in his jaw. The hemp was stubborn, resisting the pressure of his bite. He pulled back, his tiny body straining against the resistance, and felt the sharp sting of the fibers against his gums. He did not let go. He began to gnaw, a rhythmic, frantic motion that sent tremors through his own head. His jaw muscles tightened, burning with the repetitive strain of the work. He chewed with relentless speed, his teeth acting like twin needles piercing the thick, woven wall. Strand by strand, the outer layer of the hemp began to fray. He was a machine of focused intent, driven by the singular goal of severing the knot. The fibers slowly gave way, one by one. Rajan watched. His golden eyes, usually fixed on the horizon or the hunt, were now locked onto the tiny gray blur moving against the rope. The lion did not move, his massive chest barely rising as he held his breath, paralyzed by the sight. He saw the mouse's frame shudder with every bite, the small paws digging into the coarse fibers for leverage. Then, a dark, wet stain began to bloom on the hemp. It was blood. Miku's gums were bleeding, the sharp, metallic scent drifting down to the lion's nose. Yet, the mouse did not stop. He worked with a frantic, rhythmic intensity, his head snapping back and forth, tearing at the thick strands. Rajan's gaze widened. He had mocked this creature, flicked him aside like a nuisance, and now, that same creature was sacrificing his own strength. He saw the mouse's whiskers tremble, saw the exhaustion in the way his small body sagged between bites, only to surge forward again with renewed force. Rajan remained perfectly still, a prisoner of his own disbelief, watching the small, bloodied mouth continue its relentless work. The final strand of the hemp was thick and stubborn, holding the remaining tension of the entire trap. Miku braced his tiny feet against the lion's shoulder, his entire body vibrating with the effort of one last concentrated bite. The fibers groaned under the pressure, stretching thin until they were translucent, white threads against the dark, blood-stained weave. Rajan felt the rope quiver. He held his breath, his muscles coiled and ready to spring, waiting for the moment of release. The mouse gave a final, violent tug, his jaw locking down with absolute desperate force. With a sharp, sudden snap that echoed through the quiet clearing, the last strand gave way. The tension vanished instantly. The thick, braided hemp recoiled, whipping through the air as the knots unraveled. Rajan felt the weight of the trap fall away from his limbs. He surged upward, his legs moving in a blur of motion as he shook the remnants of the rope from his fur. The heavy coils hit the forest floor with a dull thud. He stood tall, his chest expanding as he drew in a deep, unobstructed breath of air. The forest was silent, the threat of the trap gone, leaving only the sound of his own heavy, relieved breathing. Rajan stood motionless, the remnants of the trap scattered like dead vines around his paws. He turned his head, his golden eyes tracking the small, trembling form of Miku as the mouse climbed down from his shoulder. Every movement the lion made was deliberate, stripped of his usual predatory grace, replaced by a heavy, conscious caution. He watched the mouse land on the soft, damp earth, his tiny chest still heaving from the exertion of the gnawing. Rajan felt the silence of the woods press in, a profound stillness that demanded a response. He did not tower over the mouse, as he had before. Instead, he shifted his massive weight, his joints creaking as he lowered his head. He brought his snout down, inch by agonizing inch, until the coarse fur of his muzzle brushed the dirt. He stopped only when his nose was mere inches from the mouse. He nudged the mouse with the very tip of his nose, a soft, deliberate contact that bridged the chasm between their worlds. Rajan pulled his head back, his movements fluid and unhurried. He stood to his full height, yet he did not turn away or return to his prowl. He looked down at the small creature standing in the dirt. Miku began to move, his tiny legs working in frantic, rhythmic bursts. Rajan took a step, then stopped, his massive paw hovering just inches behind the mouse. He adjusted his stride, shortening his reach to match the mouse's frantic pace. The lion walked with his head tilted low, his golden eyes fixed on the small, scurrying shape at his side. Every time the mouse paused to navigate a root or a stone, the lion halted, waiting with infinite patience. The forest floor, once a place of hunt and flight, now bore the weight of this strange, slow procession. They moved through the dappled light, passing beneath the heavy boughs of the banyan tree where they had first met. The lion's heavy, rhythmic footfalls were punctuated by the light, quick scratching of the mouse's claws on the dry leaves. It was a sight that defied the laws of the woods. The predator had become a guardian, and the prey had become a companion. The canopy overhead seemed to hold its breath as the lion and the mouse moved deeper into the thicket. Other creatures emerged from the ferns, watching the pair pass with wide, unblinking eyes. The old order of the woods, built on fear and the sharp edge of the claw, had fractured. What remained was a new, quiet truth. Where once there was only the instinct to hunt or hide, there was now a path carved by a different kind of power. Rajan did not look for prey. He looked for the small, quick movements of his companion. Miku did not scurry in terror. He moved with the confidence of one protected by the strongest force in the clearing. This was not a change of heart, but a change of nature itself. The forest had learned that the greatest strength was not found in the roar that shook the leaves, but in the small, persistent act of mercy that kept the life within them beating. The hierarchy had dissolved, replaced by a bond that defied the ancient rules of the wild. Kindness had proven its weight, and the woods would never be the same.